I think we're live already, aren't we?
Yep, yep.
So, welcome everybody to the weekly dev meeting with nobody in charge, apparently. Nate Nate is gone. Welcome everybody, and I'm getting feedback. Just 1 second. There we go. I had the stream going in the background. Anyways, um, Nate is off at work stuff and bad camp this week. He's got a busy week and was unable to attend. So we're plowing ahead without him. Let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name's Tim Erickson. I'm St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. We're going to do it our usual call the next person way. Jen, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Jen Lampton joining from Oakland, California. Greg?
And hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Melbourne, Australia. I haven't been in touch with most of what's going on in the community for several months, so I'm trying to catch up. That's it for me from now. Easy. No, Easy is muted. Who didn't go? Eli then? Oh, Easy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. I was getting back here. I'm Izzy. I'm a freelance developer in Vancouver, BC, Canada. Thanks. And Martin?
Hello, I'm Martin Price. I'm a backdrop developer for System Horizons in Northeast England. And I think that is everyone, isn't it? Yeah.
I think so. So, because I spoke first, am I in charge now? So again, Nate's gone, so we're going ahead and having a meeting. Maybe this meeting will be a little shorter than usual. We'll see. There's a few items in the agenda. Jen, did you have any like contrib announcements or anything ready, or should we skip that?
There are a few contrib modules out this week. The domain registration module and entity forms, which is kind of a big deal. But yeah, that's it for new projects.
Okay, so there's actually a release for entity forms already. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I saw that work was happening. Didn't realize we had a release. Okay. So do we have any other sort of normal business like that we do? I forget, or do we jump right into topics?
I think we can jump into topics.
Okay. Well, why don't we jump into the topic we were talking about when right before we went live, which was there is a discussion in the forum right now. It's called Initiative Proposal Drupal 7 Mirror. And apparently there are some things which I don't know how literally to take them, but in the Drupal 7 end of life announcement that imply that there's no guarantees about. I think like one of the statements is Drupal.org will no longer support tasks related to Drupal 7, including documentation, navigation, automated testing, packaging. It says Drupal.org file archive packaging for Drupal 7 will be shut off. The archives may be removed, and packaged tarballs may no longer be downloadable. All of these things are stated in this release, none of which are clearly stating that we're going to lose access to the Drupal 7 contrib library, but I can see how it at least seems to imply that there's no guarantees. And I think the person who raised this issue pointed out, given other things happening in the open source world right now, that we should keep in mind that, things that were once expected, like I would have assumed that Drupal 7 projects would continue to be available indefinitely. But I don't know if I don't know if we know that. And I think the suggestion is, since the ability to port Drupal 7 modules to Backdrop is pretty critical for our project, we might not want to leave that entirely in the hands of other people, including the Drupal Association. So is there something we can do to mirror the Drupal 7 library? And the person who raised this issue went ahead and tried to do and is in the process of or has already created a backup of the Drupal 7 contrib library sort of on a private server. I assume the reason they did it that way was just because that was easy and they don't want to be responsible for maintaining anything public. But so there may be individuals who back this up, but I think I suggested we bring this up in a dev meeting just so we could talk a bit about it and see if there's anything more we want to do as a community. Do we want to do anything official and make sure we have access? Because, for example, the person who just did this, they might, something could happen to them and their private repo go away. So, we could still lose access if we're dependent on any one individual. So I don't know. Do people think this is a concern we should be concerned about, and or any ideas of how we could manage this or what we should be doing?
Look, it is a possibility, but I don't think that well, let me rephrase that. Perhaps we can reach out to the community through events if we have people that we know from the Drupal Association or whoever is responsible. And I know that they will not be able to dedicate resources to accommodate us, but if we offered whatever task it is to first ask us, and if it's human hours that are required, maybe we can put the human hours, but all they would need to do is just accommodate, let us know ahead of time so that we can sort of slot it in and not do last minute things, or just hey, we're deleting this. No, don't do it yet, because then that's going to cost them money, right? If we do it planned ahead of time and we have notification with enough time ahead of whatever is going to happen, if it is going to happen, we need to ask. That's what I'm saying. So because it might be as simple as, no, we're not planning to delete anything. And then just saying, yes, if you ever do, can you please include us?
Sure. Izzy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, did someone suggest that the Wayback Machine could do this?
No, someone suggested that the disappearance of the Wayback Machine is a good reason that we shouldn't rely on other people like Drupal.org.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right. So the two examples that were given were, one, the Wayback Machine, right? That's something that some people may rely on, and that at least is temporarily disappeared. It may come, I don't know if it's back already. It might already be back, but the point is they're having difficulties, and so there's some risk there. And then the other example was sort of turmoil in the WordPress community, and how that could suggest instability.
Then I see that you have your hand
Yeah.
up, but are we discussing about the code base now or documentation and anything related?
We're talking about code base right now, I think.
Code base. How is Wayback? I'm not aware of Wayback Machine. It just saves.
The Wayback Machine has nothing to do with the Drupal 7 code base. What it is an example of a trusted internet resource that one day people depended on, and the next day it was potentially gone.
Yep,
and so the point is that we could be dependent on Drupal.org today, and for some unforeseen reason, and it could be something that the DA doesn't anticipate, right? Is that they experience some sort of an attack, and the easiest thing to do is to just shut down the servers, and they decide, well, we don't need it, so we'll just shut down the servers. And I'm coming up with a far out hypothetical example, right? Not making a prediction. Jan, you've been waiting to talk.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any plan for them to not maintain Drupal 7. At least I haven't heard that through the Drupal community. I know what they are going to do is not allow new people to appear and say, I would like to maintain this old Drupal 7 project. And so for those, the right solution is to fork them somewhere else. And we've already seen a lot of this happening with active contrib modules ending up under the Drupal 7 security group. And I think we'll continue to see that too. Modules either moved or forked into their control. And I imagine we'll do the same thing. We'll either move or fork modules into GitHub as they're needed for Backdrop. I think the plan is to move all of the existing Drupal code into GitLab if it's not already there. And then it would not necessarily be a Drupal.org issue that we're relying on, but a GitLab issue. And Drupal.org is just a user interface over the top. So that sort of provides Drupal.org as a good way to get to that code, but the code is really a GitLab. And so we're relying more on GitLab than Drupal.org, which I feel like is slightly more trustworthy as far as an internet service that might disappear one day. But as far as I know, there's no plans for them to just like delete it. I think
Yeah.
it'll be around as long as is reasonable. That
Is
said,
it GitLab's infrastructure or is it the GitLab instance on Drupal's servers?
Yes, that's what it is. It's my
Yeah.
understanding that it's custom. Yeah, yeah. It's what you call it. It's not GitLab itself. It's what you call it? Not white labeled. What do they call them? It's slipping my head now.
Self-hosted, I don't know.
yeah,
Self-hosted.
self-hosted,
Yes,
I
that's it.
think.
Self-hosted instance.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
But yeah, I don't know. I also agree, Greg, that there are, or Tim, whoever said it, that there could be things that the Drupal Association isn't anticipating, and one day they're like, we just have to kill the things that aren't important to us anymore, and this is less important than anything else. But I don't think that's a January 5th, we're planning on it activity. For the stuff that they know that they aren't going to add new maintainers for, it could be that some of those projects we've already forked and they're already unsupported in Drupal, and our maintainers might want to volunteer to maintain the Drupal projects too, just so that we still have access to do that if we need it in the future. And I might be able to help with that. So we can, I don't know, we'll see what we can do before January 5th, but I would imagine that yeah, I don't know. I don't think anything's going away, and I think that we'll probably still be able to get access to stuff that we need.
One thought is if we can, I know that we have a backdrop or CMS organization in Drupal.org. If we can create a user that is owned, like the passwords are in our shared 1Password account, and we ask them to add that account as a co-maintainer to all the D7 projects, if that's possible, and it doesn't breach any of the agreements with the actual maintainers. So
Yeah, I think we
that's
would be careful. We need to be careful with that unless we want to make sure that there's a person behind that account, because it could be that there are like security issues popping up where even if the Drupal security team isn't going to make a release, we'd still want to address them, especially if they're also in Drupal and Backdrop, and having that go to like nothing, I think would be really bad just in general. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like if we have someone that's willing to maintain all those modules, then yes. I don't want that to be me. And I'm worried that that's,
Right.
I'll maintain the ones that I've agreed to maintain, but I don't want to just take on everything.
Yeah.
On the
But
Well-
is the Drupal security organization planning to sort of do releases? Because from what we understand from that thing is that Drupal.org will not do any more of the kind of packaging
Mhm.
for Drupal 7 versions of projects. They will only do the later versions. So presumably, even if someone is doing stuff to that module, the only way it could have a release is if someone either I don't know how it's done on GitLab, but in GitHub you could manually create those assets and add them if you didn't have a packager.
I think that I don't even think the assets will be creatable via packager. I would imagine that you would just have to manage it like a normal GitHub project, where you would add a tag and push it up, and then you would tell people grab the latest tag. And that way, if I'm maintaining a Drupal 7 website long after the life of Drupal 7 is over and there's a security issue for my module, I can still get it. It might not be like listed with a download here link, but I can just go to that project and pull the latest version, the same way as most Git projects are managed on GitLab and GitHub. So we would lose the convenience of the date and the release information like in the info file, all the stuff the packager does, but we would still be able to get a secure version of the code.
Yeah, look, we have forked and ported like the majority of the most popular modules already, right? So we have covered the majority, but there's always, like you said, I can't remember if it was you, Martin, that there's going to be this odd module when sites are being ported that is not widely used, and it's an edge case, right? I think that whatever we discuss here is useful, sort of like for awareness, but at the end of the day, we need to just sit on a table, maybe during a BOF or some informal discussion in one of the Drupal events, and approach the people that are sort of like holding the keys for these, either decision-wise or, and ask them to include us, or keep in mind that, there's hundreds of thousands of D7 sites, and whatever happens, these, like, we need to be considerate. This is open source and it's like a noble cause, right? We're not gonna abandon hundreds of thousands of site owners, right? Like a polite way of saying, like, hey, if you decide to do anything with this, please include us in the decision ahead of time so that we can sort of like react to that if we have the capacity. You're muted, Tim. Sorry.
I saw that. Greg, I agree with you that we absolutely should approach the Drupal community and express this concern and get a response to them. That should obviously be step one. But simply having some individual say we have no plans to do that is not good enough for me. I would be looking for some sort of kind of an official statement that that, like, yes, we will provide notice before doing this. But even then, I'm going to throw out that despite their intentions, what we've
It might
mentioned
happen.
before is that it could still happen. And do we want to risk it? And I'm
Mhm.
not convinced that we need to do this. I mean, there might be another situation might be with it. Somebody just sit down and go through the top 1,000 modules and see if there's any that we haven't ported yet, and just fork those or something. That seems like a lot of work, so I don't know that we want to do that. But that's just brainstorming. I think. Yeah, I'm not super worried about this, but I feel like it would be irresponsible to not at least think about it right now.
Yeah, I did have a quick look at like some of the GitHub possibilities, and I spotted that at some point one organization basically mirrored about 500 projects from Drupal.org. So there's a mix, and I think I know what Graham, person in the forum's doing, is basically looking to sort of create a local copy. But I did wonder one thing that might be possible is to you could set up an organization, something like Backdrop D7 Mirror or something, and you can basically create a bare clone locally of the Drupal code module, and then push it up to that new repository that you've created. So you could kind of automate it via a script and just kind of set it to go at a very slow pace, so it wasn't throttling anyone's servers, where you could just gradually work your way through the modules and get each one in full as on the GitHub. The only thing I couldn't work out how to do that is how you would. I think it would be a point in time thing. I'm not sure how you would. I don't think you would be able to, without manually do it. You wouldn't be able to easily update those. But I did think that was a possibility worthy of consideration.
Yeah, I'll just say this. So I think what you just described is roughly what Graham is already doing himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, before we spend a lot of time on this, if it's relatively easy to get a copy of the repo onto a private server without then the only thing is so this this person who is talking about this is doing it themselves. If we could just do that have it under our control. I'm just concerned. I don't want to rely on some individual in the community and whether or not they're available when we need it.
Absolutely.
But if it's simple enough and doesn't cost enough, maybe there's no reason not to do what he did, but to do it on a Backdrop server, so that if the community
or on a as a GitHub organization.
Sure.
So
yeah, I don't know. This is I don't think there's urgency to this because if something happened, it won't be on January 5th, right? It could be a year or two from now. So we don't have to make a decision today, but I felt like since we had somebody in the community raising this, we should at least talk about it. So anybody else have anything else to add on this?
Yeah, just mention that there is a GitHub copy of Drupal core that I'm aware of, and I think that this is being kept in sync. So there is at least a very isolated use case just for Drupal core that does that. Basically syncs from GitLab, from the self-hosted GitLab instance to the public GitHub repo. And I'm not aware of any manual process being there. It's just anything that is being done on GitLab is being mirrored on the GitHub thing. So there's a precedence and some automation in place that does that already. So yeah, I don't see, like, if we were to do something outside that organization to a different sort of like keep it in sync with a different repo, we still need to get in touch with the Drupal community and whoever is managing that aspect. Tim Lennon, I think it's like should be a good. I think that he was managing the move to GitLab, if memory serves well. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but
yeah, probably. But I think the person doesn't matter right now. We can figure that out. Eli asked in chat how groups like Hero Devs do it, and I mean, I'm just going to assume that like Hero Devs and now Tag One are talking about extended support for Drupal 7. And to my knowledge, that will not be on Drupal.org. They will be doing that themselves and issuing the releases themselves. Does anybody know? So all they have to do, I think, is clone, the Drupal.core, the Drupal core library, and then continue to issue their own releases. Is that, Jen, do you have any idea how that would happen? No? Okay. But I think
they're not. Sorry, they're not.
It's the contrib library is a little bit more of a unique case, right? So that I don't know if that has been addressed by people like Hero Devs. Hero Devs was not committing to providing updates to the contrib. They were just, this was a way to keep core secure.
I think I mean, I don't know, I haven't gotten a proposal from them, but I think their offer was to keep everything you're hosting on their platform secure. So that would include contrib modules and libraries and stuff like that also. But I think that the way they're planning on doing that is by patching the code that you're running and not by creating new releases of the contrib projects and updating it. I think they're like sort of going to freeze it where it is and then patch your modules. If they have updates for core, that would be great. But I think the modules are just getting patched. And don't know for sure, but that would be my guess.
Okay. And if anybody's not aware, this may not be that recent, but that was just for a long time, Hero Devs was the only one talking about this. Right now, Tag One is also offering long-term support. And I believe these are two independent things. They're not, I don't know that they're collaborating, but I'm not sure about that.
And there's also the Drupal 7 security group. So if you want to buy support, you can do that. If you just want supported code, you can get that yourself. I know there are a lot of businesses that need someone else to be liable for their stuff being secure. And so having a business entity you can pay for that is super valuable. But if you're just like Joe Schmo and you want a secure copy of your module, you can probably get it from the Drupal 7 security group and maintain those yourself too. Okay. So there's a free option and two paid options currently.
I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, but I feel like at least one of the groups has offered or is planning, at least for a while, to make like security updates public. They just won't be, like it'll just be a patch that you have to know how to apply yourself.
Yep.
So
I think so.
Okay. Let's move on. I mean, the only other topic I think
just to back up on that, sorry, just to back up on that, my understanding was that it's Tag One that was going to be offering security updates, and Pantheon was getting in on the mix and so on. I don't know where they're at now for doing that, but I would draw people's attention back to the Drupal 6 long-term support. And Tag One was one of the companies, and I can't remember right now who the other one was, but they did a much better job of creating a properly replicated system that would add to or replace the update PHP and the available updates, so that it could actually go and fetch well, at least identify updates on the report from their server setup. Whereas Tag One, all they did was have a whole long list of different patches that you'd have to apply. And they had core patches and they had contrib patches that were important, all kind of in one long thread. So there's a better way to do it and a not so good way to do it. And I have no idea what's going to come forward. Thank
So
you.
the other company you're probably thinking of is Drupal Wizard. I think that was what their name was. But the way Drupal 6 long-term support worked is that all of the patches that were created for core were eventually posted to public. So they were on the Drupal, there was like Drupal 6 releases for them, even though they weren't official releases. And the people who were doing the long-term support got My Drop Wizard. Yeah, thank you, that was it. Got like first access to offer it to their customers, but they did eventually have to release it to the public. I don't think they have that same kind of requirement for Drupal 7 because the Drupal 7 long-term support program fell apart initially, which was going to copy the Drupal 6 long-term support program. But you were talking about having a system that integrated with your version of Drupal that would allow you to see updates. The Drupal 7 security group has already created that product. So if you're running a Drupal 7 module or Drupal 7 site with unsupported modules on it, you can switch your version of the update module with their version of the update module, and you'll get notifications about new releases for unsupported Drupal projects that have been taken over by the Drupal 7 security group. So that tool already exists, and anyone on any of those platforms can install that and use it right now. And I think that was sort of what My Drop Wizard did, is they built a new user interface that interacted with the official releases of these projects. And I don't think Tag One offered that. They just put links to the official versions of the projects, but what they were using was the same, like the end result was the same, was just how they documented it was very convenient for My Drop Wizard and very inconvenient for Tag One. But I do think that both of those groups collaborated on the technical solutions themselves that did get released to the public. But yeah, we already have that for Drupal 7, which is good. And it's maintained by the free group as opposed to the 2 paid groups, which is even better. So
Okay.
if you're running Drupal 7, I recommend installing it.
Installing Drupal 7? Should we
No,
build a new
there's a Drupal 7 update module that's
get it.
maintained by the D7 security group. Yeah. So
Um,
until you move to Backdrop, of course.
so there's also in the forum, we also have, there's an issue about there's an issue about the forum that I posted there. I don't think we need to talk about it here. It's just something that's come up again recently. I think it's been around for a while. When people put really long links in the forum, the formatting is kind of ugly. Hopefully somebody will get a chance to look at that. And RG Piano listed a couple of issues, which as far as I can tell, these don't need to be talked about today. It looks like we talked about them all in previous meetings. He just is encouraging us to take a look at them. RG Piano, if you're listening, I would just argue that, well, if these are bug reports, yeah, they could get into a current release. So we should look at those soon. But my point is, I think some of us will be focused more on like the next release in a month or so than we are now.
Yeah,
But-
I do think the link issue, if we don't get that in a bug fix before the minor release, that should go in the minor, because I think it's going to have tests.
Okay.
So that I think is, I mean, we were almost there last time, so I feel like it's realistic to get that moving.
Okay. But yes, but please, if anybody is listening and has the ability to look at and help with those issues, do so. I'm sorry, Laren left because he just proposed something in Zulip about an hour or two ago, which goes back to our discussion last week about core themes. I don't know if you saw his post, Jen, but he suggested merging Gin. Is Gin a legitimate contender for inclusion in core?
Interesting.
And that is much further along. So
yeah, it's a back-end theme though.
Right. It would
not
be
a front-end theme.
yes.
So it doesn't have quite the same impression. And I
Yes.
think we did talk about it before. Everybody loved Gin. generally, but the code isn't written in a way that's core compatible. So we would have to rewrite it with the like course values in mind, where like you aren't using
Okay.
CSS precompilers or whatever, which I think probably can be done in a way that it's still like appealing to work with now, because when Gin was written, there wasn't all of the support with like CSS variables and stuff that we have now. But it is going to require like a lot of rethinking it, which makes me think that they probably don't have time to do that by 1.0
Okay.
or January 15th. What is that? 30.
So
30.0.
I don't think Laren didn't suggest that we do it for the next release. He just suggested that we do it at some point.
Yes.
But that got me thinking, oh, well, maybe this is a possibility for the next release, given how much work has went into it. But it sounds like you're saying no, even though
Yeah.
it's as far along as it is, it would still require a lot of work. Okay.
We'd either need to bend the rules of what we decided that core should and shouldn't do, and it goes to the preprocesses that Jen mentioned. So one of the values, or not, I'm not going to say values, one of the things that we have agreed on is that pure HTML, CSS, PHP, JavaScript, no preprocesses, no things like that, so that it's easier for people to contribute, even if they're not, highly technical people.
Well, if this is not something that could be done quickly, then I think we could postpone this, although Izzy has a comment. Izzy, what do you have?
Yeah, I have a comment about that. I mean, Gin's okay, but it doesn't really work for me. And so I'm not really going to jump on the bandwagon of trying to promote it. I think there's a lot of other things that, as we're coming to the release of 1.30, I think it's okay for an admin theme, and people can choose to use it. And I played around with it, but I can't see advocating for it being a main theme. The other thing, and time's running out, the other thing that was on my mind was Drupal CMS. And not because I'm promoting it, but it is kind of slick what they're doing now. I mean, you can't ignore it if you're okay with Composer. But the thing that was striking to me is the user interface. Okay, and I think we've talked a little bit about this, but the user interface is very much like Gutenberg, right? According to the previews that I've seen. And they got one thing right that WordPress didn't, and that is that they start by having a container. And this was something we discovered ourselves when we were working with WordPress, is that if you start by creating a container, and then you put anything else inside that you want, like another container or columns or slideshow or whatever, then you've got flexibility to move things around. So Drupal 7 has done the same thing. I mean, not Drupal 7, I mean Drupal CMS has done the same thing, but they've got the added advantage of Drupal in that all of this stuff is typed. And it relates to what we talked about last week in the dev meeting or in the user meeting after it. And that is the single directory components. And I'm just going to add this link into the chat. I noticed that there was a similar discussion a while back in the forum about Backdrop and using paragraphs and renaming those, at least in the UI, to components. So we're not far off from it. When you look at Drupal CMS, what they did is they used React to create this interface. And I don't want to speak too loud. I don't want to wake in Doxella up, because she might say, oh yeah, we can do that with a little bit of JS. But is there some certain things that we would like to do to transform Drupal in the next month and a half, 2 months? I mean, I hate to say that because I know there's a lot already going on. Thank you.
Your last statement, to transform Drupal or to transform Backdrop?
Sorry, I meant Backdrop.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm skeptical about transforming anything in 2 months, but barring that, anybody?
Then you're
I
muted.
think there's a Gutenberg contrib module for Drupal 7, and it would be
Yes.
interesting to see what that would look like for Backdrop.
Mhm.
But there's like a very big fundamental difference between the way Gutenberg lays out your content and the way Paragraphs lays out your content. And what Gutenberg does is it takes all of the structure and shoves it into the body field. So it has one field and it puts a whole bunch of HTML in it, which is really hard to deal with when you're showing it in summaries or different screen sizes or whatever else, because you sometimes want to be able to change that. Paragraphs, what it does is the only thing in your database is data, and all of the structure is wrapped in the field organization around it. And so even though you can sort of produce the same page using both tools, I think different groups are going to have different use cases for which one they want to use. And I feel like WordPress has to do Gutenberg because everybody always uses the body field. They don't really have a good field system. They don't really have a good view system. Whereas Drupal is trying to figure out how to do it more in a paragraph way, at least before the most recent Gutenberg, because we have a really great, elegant database structure, and it's easy to pull all of the stuff out of the database and then display it differently on the front end. So I don't really know where Backdrop lives because it's halfway between those two use cases. But I feel like it would be interesting to see how a Gutenberg module would work on Backdrop, even if it was something like React on the front end. I feel like in Contrib that could be a really fun experiment. So
Okay. But Izzy has his hand back up. Do you want to continue? Then I have something.
Yeah.
After. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what caught my eye with that forum discussion, is that Backdrop is already with paragraphs. So it can offer two things. You can either edit a page with your editor, which is one component, or you can add another component, paragraphs, and keep on going. So we've already got that capability. It's just a question of, so we're not trying to go back to the WordPress Gutenberg idea of throw everything into one pile and hope it doesn't fall apart. We're already got it structured as data. If we want to have that option of paragraphs as components, but then of course we have to deal with single directory components if we want to really pull it off.
I think I forgot what I was going to say, but I have new thoughts. One of which is that, yeah, I mean, I don't think, Izzy, that this is something that is legit for 1.30, but it doesn't hurt to be talking about it anyways. I do think talking about, like what the next phase of our editor experience is a good idea. It would seem to me a great topic. I hate to keep harping on the same thing, but to bring it to Backdrop live, I think that if you're proposing, Jen, when you just said we're realistic for core, do you mean 1.30 or forever?
I think ever. I feel like, we have a lot of priorities, and because this isn't a majority use case, it's not something that would make the top of that list.
Right.
But it's hard to say ever because who knows what the future will hold.
Right.
But I would say like short term, next year, maybe not.
Sure. I would say though that if Izzy, for example, you thought that it was something that should go into core, then like how would you do that? I think the next steps, if you were going to do that, would be some kind of an issue that we got to have a core issue, right? So for anything to move forward, there has to be a specific issue in core, and there may be one already that you could find and sort of advocate for or push along. But
I
step
would say
one,
before we even have a core issue, it might be helpful to be like, this is what it works like in Contrib. And then the core issue would be move the Contrib project into core.
sure.
Yeah. Can I say I have some thoughts? So that it's not directly related, but what Izzy mentioned was referenced or prefaced with the Drupal CMS. And although it's very sleek and it does awesome things, fundamentally how to achieve these things, like even the experience builder, requires so many technologies to come together, which are not simple. They require very highly technical people to be contributing, and that we would need to bend the rules or the decisions that we made when it came to Backdrop, keeping it simple and allowing people with simple technical knowledge to craft their sites. So as Jen said, this feels like something that should be explored in Contrib and can be done in Contrib, my understanding is. But for core, we would need to fundamentally change certain of the decisions and bend the rules if we were to get either Gin as the way that it is now, or Gutenberg, or something else. Like we would have to fundamentally change certain things. So yeah, it certainly cannot be done in a couple of months. But it needs decisions to be made if that's to be done, and it's like it goes deeper than the technical solutions as well.
If I were committed to getting something like into this core, I'm going to modify what Jen said a little bit. My strategy would be both. Would be that I would have a core issue that says this. My long-term goal is to get this into core, and then I would probably try working on a contrib version of it. And so most of the work would happen in contrib, but we would keep it on the horizon for core as a candidate, so people could, people were aware that that's, what your long-term goal is, and hopefully build some, and then you would try to build some consensus over time. And I think Izzy wasn't talking about like integrating Gutenberg. He was talking about what the backdrop version of that would be, right?
Yeah.
Which might be based on paragraphs, or it might be something new. And I mean, I think that's a very interesting discussion, whether it's a core or contrib thing. Is like, what is the next generation? Should we consider paragraphs to be our version of that and just keep making paragraphs better, or is there something else that we should be looking at?
Yeah, fair enough. I think that if it gets in contrib, then you would be able to judge by the usage statistics over time whether a paragraphs approach or Gutenberg approach are better. But my personal understanding is that both of these come with problems.
Yeah.
Complexity and performance. So complexity, actually Gutenberg introduces complexity by simplicity. As I said, it's like it creates a blob of thing and it treats your CMS as a word editor, right? So you can't do the complex things that people come to Drupal and Backdrop for. And I'm not questioning that this is a useful, like maybe you would have a portion of the community that actually favors ease of use and the features that are provided by Gutenberg over, doing overly complicated stuff with Backdrop, but still wants to get some of the benefits of Backdrop. So that sounds like a contrib case. Like, yes, I'm going to get Backdrop, but I like the ease of Gutenberg, so I'm going to install that. But it doesn't feel that anything Gutenberg related would become a core or an official core release solution. And the same with paragraphs. Paragraphs introduces like when you do a lot of complex and a lot of levels of depth of paragraphs, then you introduce performance issues. So you go to solutions that will require more powerful and expensive hosting, and then also editing these things become very cumbersome. Like the UI for editing these things becomes, So these are my thoughts. These are my understanding, and I've seen that like customers complain about that, developers when they implement complain about that, site owners complaining about site slowness when introducing that, and content editors as well. So yeah.
Well, we need to wrap up this meeting. On my normal, though, preaching about Backdrop Live, I'm going to say, here's how to use Backdrop Live to promote something like this. I would do, there's one or two things that I could see coming out of this at Backdrop Live. One would be, if somebody wanted to sort that was familiar with Drupal CMS, wanted to like give us a tour and show us what they're doing with maybe the stated goal of like, what can we learn? What are some of the good ideas that they're doing that we might want to learn from? I think that would be really interesting. So, and I think a lot of us haven't had time to pay attention to the Starshot background Drupal's. And if anybody's unclear on that, Drupal CMS is now the official name of the Starshot initiative. So these things are interchangeable. But anyway, so I think, I think we should be definitely watching that and learning from it. And Backdrop Live wouldn't be a bad time if we had somebody. We could also invite somebody that is like an expert in Starshot in the Drupal community to come and sort of give us an update. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And that with the idea that we're interested in learning from them. The other way that you could do at Backdrop Live would be to just host a session, which is like, what is the next gen editor experience? And let's map it out. And it could be just a brainstorming session. And the goal would be to actually create like a first draft proposal of where you think we should go. I'll give you an example, like way before we got entity or reference module in core. I had a session at Backdrop Live where I said, reference module in core, what next steps? And Nate was the only one who showed up. And Nate and I spent an hour like just drafting what the next steps would be. And that and I think we actually did that more than once at Backdrop Live. Once it was just two of us, another time we had maybe 4 or 5 people. But the point being is that that's like an hour block of time that you can dedicate to actually brainstorm and like think about what would the next steps be and get a proposal out there. Obviously that could happen you could have that meeting any time of the year, but Backdrop Live is a good time. And I want people to know it's appropriate to do that, right? So if you're feeling passionate about this, if you do it at Backdrop Live, you've got a whole bunch of people there already, that are interested in Backdrop, and you might be more likely to get people to come to your meeting and help sort of make it a working meeting, right? It doesn't have to be sort of educational. It could be, let's plan the next step of this initiative. Yeah, well, I know, Izzy, I see your comment. I know Luke is involved in the summit. I think there's a summit tomorrow afternoon at Bad Camp on Starshot. I don't know exactly what Luke's involvement is, but he might be somebody who could do what I just talked about. We should ask him. Okay, I think we're over the time for the dev meeting. Let's go ahead and wrap this up, and then we'll chat about user group and what we want to do. Okay, bye everybody.
Thanks.
Where is the